Wow, okay.
So I just got a request if we could record your presentation, and I believe it should now be recording. Okay.
Cool. Oh dear. All right.
More
better behave, no bad words.
We know that there's more people who aren't here that will be interested in this topic. Thank you.
Great. So our presentation is going to tell the story of how this work came about. And we're going to talk about the financial levers that we could pull here in Massachusetts that are being pulled all over the world, and key targets, asset managers, pension funds, banks, insurance companies that we are targeting, and that you can join us in working to help them change business as usual. We're going to offer you.
Can you send the copy of the presentation?
It's already been sent.
Yep.
Ah,
Yep.
okay.
I'm going to get to that. So we're going to be offering opportunities to take action, all different kinds of things to do. We especially want to discuss how we can work with Sierra Club in Massachusetts, get your ideas about how to engage volunteers and chapters, to mobilize them, involve them in the actions that are already planned, and to get involved in helping us plan more. And also, our presentation is a work in progress. So when we have a discussion at the end, we'd also love to hear your questions about the campaigns, but we'd also love to hear what really made a lot of sense to you, what was exciting to you, as well as what was still confusing. And I just want to make sure that people on Zoom or on the phone have the PDF of the presentation, and hopefully you can figure out which slide we're talking about as we go.
They should be, for the people on Zoom, they should now be able to see the presentation that's on our screen.
Okay.
We're sharing.
Folks on the phone, or?
Yeah, just make sure, want to make sure people know where we are.
Yeah.
Should we check in? We're looking at a picture of fracking in Pennsylvania.
Can everybody on Zoom see the screen?
Yes. Yes, it's visible.
Yes, thank you.
Sure, can.
Oh, Mary.
Okay, great. This is Mary again, and this whole thing started with a trip in April of 2017 to Susquehanna County in Northeast Pennsylvania, and it came about through the Gas Leaks Allies. As you know, we've been working on gas leaks, but we went to Pennsylvania to see what fracking was all about up close and personal. And so we spent 3 days there, and we went to compressor stations and the fracking pads themselves. And more importantly, we talked to the people there. And some people were pro-fracking, and some, most were affected profoundly by fracking. They couldn't drink the water. 17 out of 19 cows died on this guy's farm. And it was truly a community that was fractured. So we came back to Massachusetts and we continued doing our work, but the 6 of us that went, which include scientists and methane measurers and activists like myself, decided that we would go visit Green Mountain Power. And Green Mountain Power is in Vermont. But at that time, it was being run by Mary Powell, who was a progressive and a visionary. She saw that her utility should offer renewable energy. And David Zeke and Kathy were on that trip. And this picture is the Stafford Hill solar array that Green Mountain Power built on a toxic landfill. We went to their technology center. We learned that they were installing heat pumps and taking out big oil drums. They had workers that were transitioning from kind of oil maintenance to heating and cooling pump maintenance. And they installed power walls in some areas, Tesla power walls, to manage that peak demand that we so often hear about. So it was really 2 ends of the shelf, of the bookends. That's what I'm looking for. So that led to an exploration of how can this be so different, and it led us to finance, how things got financed. what was being invested in, what was being financed by banks and insured by insurance companies. And so we are now part of BlackRock's Big Problem. And to my delight, I spent 2 days with Ben Cushing in Washington, D.C. And so Sierra Club is a really important part of BlackRock's Big Problem. And as you can see on this next slide, that the theory of change was target the biggest, the baddest. And we have 3 big targets: BlackRock, which owns iShares, JP Morgan Chase, and Liberty Mutual. Liberty Mutual is right here in Boston, but we know BlackRock has an office in Boston, and JP Morgan Chase is very interested in the Boston market with their Chase branches. So biggest targets, build the movement, and stop the money pipeline.
Mary, can you say what BlackRock's big problem is?
Well, BlackRock has many problems, but BlackRock's big problem is the umbrella. So BlackRock itself, its governance is a problem because its CEO is its chair of the board. So Larry Fink has both roles, kind of hard to, well, it's hard to do anything that he doesn't want to do. BlackRock is also the largest asset manager. It's $7 trillion with assets under management. And BlackRock is the biggest investor in coal, oil, gas, tar sands, deforestation companies, consumer goods that are, that are wrecking the planet. So it has a lot of problems, and it is the biggest one. So in terms of size. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands what an asset manager is. An asset manager in the simplest form is an entity that manages for someone or some other company. So it's managing money for someone else. And there's some examples here: pensions, self-directed retirement plans, which are 401k plans, our university endowments. BlackRock has a big chunk in Harvard's, is responsible for a big chunk of Harvard's endowment, and for the retail investor. They have a lot of products that you can buy directly, a lot of products that financial advisors use to manage portfolios for their retail investors. And the one thing I want to emphasize, and if you go away with just one new thought, is that because of BlackRock's size, it has an unusual shareholder voting power. And those votes that it has at energy companies, retail companies, utilities, especially utilities, either drive change to renewable energy or keep the status quo, business as usual. So these are some of the reasons why our utilities are not moving to clean energy, because of the investors like BlackRock voting for business as usual. So here you see the slide that just emphasizes what I just said. It contributes to, BlackRock contributes to climate change more than any corporation or company on the planet. So they have a big problem. And this slide shows you what we want them to do. We want them to offer fossil-free and deforest-free funds as default options. We want them to push companies that they own to align with the Paris Agreement and to bring their own business to a net zero situation. And we also don't want them to just say, okay, business as usual. They have the power, they have the choice to push these companies to decarbonize. This gives you an idea of the largest asset managers and the fossil fuel reserves that they have under management. Obviously, BlackRock, 6.3 trillion. This is from last year end. No, I'm sorry, it's from first half 2018. You can see what percentage they have in fossils.
Do you want to say anything about Vanguard or State Street?
Vanguard is number 2, and our State Street is number 3.
So why wouldn't Vanguard and State Street be in that list of the big 3 that you mentioned earlier?
If you can think of a stool, so we have different parts of the financial sector, and one is the asset managers, and one are the banks, and one's the insurance companies. So BlackRock is the largest. So
For asset management.
for asset managers.
Mhm.
So good point, though. All of them need to change the way they do business. But our theory of change was go after the biggest one, get them to move a little bit, and then the others will follow. But we have to target those other folks too. Right. One thing here, you'll see that all these asset managers have what they've termed climate funds. So they're appealing to those of us that care about climate and understand that our investments can be geared towards clean energy. So this really gets me kind of angry because they're marketing these as climate funds, but you can see by the chart that in those climate funds, there's coal reserves. And once again, BlackRock is right up there. You see Northern Trust is even there, and we have State Street on that list as well. So what do? We had all this great research. Ben Cushing at Sierra Club in DC. We have financial analysts. We have folks that are really tearing apart the data, and so we mobilized and we hit the streets. And this picture here is some folks in New York saying, we understand how you vote BlackRock, and you're not doing a good job. You are not doing a good job. There's 16 key climate issues last year. All these issues are filed with the Securities Exchange Commission, and on every single one of them, BlackRock voted no, whereas ethical investors voted for transparency, moving to clean energy, and separating the CEO and the chair of the board position at some of these companies so they have better governance. So once again, we found this out, and it was really Mothers Out Front who we engaged. And so one of those 16 votes was at Duke Energy, one of the dirtiest energy companies in the United States, owns part of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, and every year the board of directors gets voted on to the board again. And this fellow here on the left, Dan D'Amico, self-proclaimed climate denier, reinstated on Duke Energy's board as its sustainability head. And BlackRock voted to reinstate this guy. So what do? We created a call sheet. We put his picture on the call sheet. Debbie New did an amazing job of kind of messaging. We had a lot of data on this guy. We had filed a big report saying this is the reason why he should not be a leader in this company. And we called this lady here on the right. Her name's Michelle Edkins, and she runs BlackRock's stewardship group. And we called her up. We had about 50, 75 phone calls in there, and one of our volunteers actually talked to her, and she said, oh, we don't have to worry about climate change for 20 or 30 years. Kid you not. That's what she said.
Oh, I wish that was recorded.
Oh, no kidding. So anyway, so these are some of the things that we're thinking about, that we'd love help with planning, and they're actually kind of fun. And so this is just one thing that Mothers Out Front was keen on doing. This is out front in Boston, and we created a report card of all the things that BlackRock and Larry Fink needed to work on. They got an A+ in communication, though, because they are really good at greenwashing. And here's another, another image from, New York. We had actions across the country on October 29th, San Francisco, Toronto, New York City, Washington, DC, Boston, and there were even actions in Europe.
You want to say something about deforestation and then?
Oh, I forgot about that. One really important part of this campaign is the companies that are clear cutting the Amazon. They're largely meat packing companies that own a lot of shares. And so indigenous people are being, their land is being taken away, their rights are being violated, and there's even been murders. And so the deforestation part is a very important part of this campaign and brings home how environmental justice is so important. So what happened in January? This kind of freaked me out because this is such a huge, look at this guy. He's running the biggest company in the world practically, and he blinked. He sent his letter out early January and it said, climate crisis is here. We've got to do something about it. We own it. And we're going to look at our funds and make them more sustainable. We're going to divest from coal in 20% of its assets. So they have a little ways to go. And we're going to be more transparent on how we vote. So they promised that they would let us know how they're voting on some of these issues. And now we can hold them accountable. Now we have a little opening. There's a crack in the armor. And what happened? It had a ripple effect. I'm a magnet for this kind of news, but it was all over. Financial Times, Guardian. I see you have a little, even the Globe picked it up a little bit. So we're getting through to these folks. And why did this happen? Diversity of voices, sustained pressure, and certainly very savvy work that goes on underneath.
So is this that Larry Fink did, the good language arts or something more substantial?
Well, they did get an A in language arts.
Right.
Oh, he's on the next messaging thing. No, I think it's the real deal, but it's a dip, it's a little toe in the water. There's a big analysis on what he said in his letter, and I'd be happy to send that out. It's written in pretty plain language, but it's pretty deep. Like it's a long analysis.
The pros and cons of the policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the goods and the bads.
BlackRock's Big Problem did that. Ben was on that too. And then there's a deforestation policy they just came out with, and Amazon Watch largely did a lot of that analysis. Nope.
So one of the things that Mass Sierra Club endorsed last year was the fossil fuel divestment legislation that would allow local retirement boards to divest. And we had a huge win last week in that those two bills, the local divestment bills, moved favorably out of the Joint Committee on Public Service, which a lot of bills died last week or got extended, and this one made it through. So we're moving through the process, and we wanted to thank you for that support and let you know that we're continuing to work on that, and it helps to put the pressure on the big prize, which is the state pension fund, which I think will follow once this door begins to open and local retirement boards take action.
So why this is so important, this work, is that if the pension plan says we're going to divest from fossils, coal, whatever the specifics are, how can they hire BlackRock? So now the pension plan is saying, asset manager, you better do the right thing. Not to mention they've lost a ton of money from investing in coal and some of the energy companies. So the economics are starting to bear out stupidity
Well,
of.
Real losses.
I don't mean to interrupt, but as I read Fink's letter, he was saying he was doing it strictly for fiduciary reasons, not for climate reasons. And
Mhm.
separately or somewhere, I can't quote my sources, I can't remember them, but like the stock market was up like 22% last year, but the fossil fuel companies, oil and gas, pretty much were only up by 4 or 5%. So if you look at those numbers, if from just a pure profit motive standpoint, you would be wise to divest.
Exactly.
So that's, I don't know, I'll carry on, but.
Well, that's why I wanted you to remember the voting part.
Yeah.
So you've heard about asset managers as one leg of the finance stool. We're going to talk about banks, which is the second leg of the stool. And here we're also talking about the biggest and that is JP Morgan Chase. So banks are another leg of the stool of the finance industry because they finance fossil fuel companies. JP Morgan Chase is the largest financer of fossil fuel companies, and Enbridge's Weymouth compressor station that is of such concern to us here in Massachusetts is an example of how these fossil fuel infrastructure projects are financed by big banks. So we need to go after the banks as well. Some banks, here's the hopeful part, are moving. So 16 banks have publicly announced they will not finance Arctic drilling companies. So there's a bit of a shift. But since the Paris Climate Accord, some big banks have actually increased their financing of fossil fuel companies. 33 banks have funneled $1.9 trillion into fossil fuels since 2016. So that financing is going up instead of down. I know we can move it, but they keep piling it on. So the next slide is a chart that shows that JP Morgan Chase, how far out in front they are of all the other banks. So they're the leader of the pack with nearly $100 billion in finance dollars going into fossil fuels. Chart is a result of the Rainforest Action Network's Banking on Climate Change report. Every year they do a bank scorecard, and this is the 2019 figures. And notice that a close competitor of JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Citibank, is Bank of America.
What
We
are
have a
the
lot of here in Boston.
colors?
Years. 2016.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh,
Can we go to next? Yeah, at the same time? Okay. So what is the problem with JP Morgan Chase? Why is it so bad? This is Jamie Dimon, and this is your answer, in part. So Jamie Dimon is the CEO and the chair of the board at JP Morgan Chase. This is not good corporate governance practice. As we saw with Larry Fink, who is both CEO and chair of the board, it's hard to do something that he doesn't want to do. So there is a shareholder resolution right now, which will be voted on to separate those two powerful positions. The other problem with Chase is this man. This is quite an attractive picture of him. He is Lee Raymond. He occupies the top position on JP Morgan Chase's board. He has been on this board for 33 years. He is also a longtime climate skeptic, and guess what? He is the one who turned ExxonMobil into the biggest oil company in the United States. So we have power combined here at the top of JP Morgan Chase. Here in Boston, there have already been actions led by 350 Mass at Chase branches. There are going to be more in March, and there are going to be even more in April. So we'll tell you more about that later. So that's a bit on banks, and now on insurance companies.
So one of the third leg of the stool, the four-legged stool, is insurance. And it's really important to understand about insurance that there's actually two ways that they're financing fossil fuels. Through actual insurance to fossil fuel projects, coal and tar sands and gas pipelines and oil. You know, and so insurance. And then the second is through investing. So if we have car or home insurance, they take our premiums and they invest that into the fossil fuels partially. They have $9 billion invested in fossil fuels just through premiums. And they're one of the largest companies. they're the third largest insurer of the nation's power sector, which, as you know, is mostly fossil fuels, 60% fossil fuels. And they're the fifth largest property and casualty company worldwide. So they're insuring projects like Keystone XL, Trans Mountain in British Columbia, and locally in Pennsylvania, Mariner East 2, the gas pipeline in Pennsylvania. So, you know, what the Insure Our Future campaign has been working on is getting insurance companies to adopt restrictions that will phase out fossil fuel insurance, starting with coal and tar sands. There's been 19 insurers globally to date that have adopted some kind of restrictive policy, and 4 of them in the last 6 months have been U.S. Insurers. So we're making headway, and it's a real testament to show that public pressure works, and that there is a path forward because there's also a lot of leadership in the industry. So I would go to the next slide. You know, this is a picture of a coal mine. This is tar sands. And, you know, it's really important when you talk about indigenous rights and indigenous lands. There's so much threat to those lands out in the Pacific Northwest, and there's fierce resistance by local and indigenous groups. So it's important from that standpoint as well.
I understand there was some pushing through of a pipeline through British Columbia, and there's currently all sorts of protests through Canada blocking rail lines and the like. Heard that on my favorite source, NPR.
You know, and even in Massachusetts, there have been actions blocking coal deliveries to New Hampshire. So, you know, this crisscrosses all of our communities, and there are kind of choke points or intervention points that are good to touch on. So, as I mentioned, Liberty Mutual is a huge investor in fossil fuels. Collectively, the 40 largest U.S. insurers have over $450 billion in coal, oil, gas, and electric utility stocks.
In investment, not just in insurance assets.
That's just the investment. Just the investment. $450 billion. The top 40 U.S. insurers.
Okay, and this is just the top 3.
Yeah. So this yeah.
8.9.
8.9 is just Liberty Mutual. AIG has 2.1 billion. Farmers has 1.6 billion. I was at Amica Insurance today in Rhode Island. They have almost 150 million. They're smaller, but they're all getting investment income from these companies. And one thing I will say that was in the news recently is that we're learning that an increasing amount of the dividends from fossil fuel companies are being paid for with borrowed money. And it just speaks to the story that they are not profitable, that they are not sustainable, and this can't go on forever. So when they're still keeping the interest of certain pension funds because they're paying some dividends, that's not going to last very long. And your point about the fact that they're earning much less than what the overall market is earning is a really, really important one for fiduciaries. Yeah.
So that money is California
And oil.
only.
Sorry?
So that slide was showing 9 billion or whatever in California only.
No, nationally. What
The slide said California.
Well, what I would tell you is that the California Department of Insurance is a leader in collecting data on fossil fuel investments and activity within the insurance industry. The insurance commissioner out there, Dave Jones, has made a commitment and a declaration that insurance should divest. And there's a database that I've been spending too much time in this week looking at, you know, how much different insurance companies have in fossil fuels and what portion of their overall assets does that comprise.
So these are companies that operate in California, but the numbers are for their global.
This is their global operations. Yeah, California just has this database, so that's where a lot of the information comes from.
Fire insurance companies.
How about why they don't insure the house anymore?
Oh, yeah.
That's why.
So I think that, we grabbed this slide from the National Stop the Money Pipeline campaign, webinar that was on Sunday. And one of the ironies right now about insurance is that while they're insuring fossil fuel projects and investing in them, they're also not renewing policies for homes in fire-prone areas, and they've been just canceling renewals for homeowners in California since the wildfires. You know, and the other thing that gets my gut is that they're also providing a new product that provides personal liability for executives and officers of fossil fuel companies so that they're insulated from their impacts as CEOs and executives. So it's a directors and officers insurance product for fossil fuel companies.
Wow.
Dirty. Like, you know, and but you know, the positive spin that I would add to this is that insurance, the core purpose of the insurance industry is to manage and protect society from risk. And so ultimately, I think they're in one of the best positions to be able to take on the climate crisis because it behooves them to do this because it's actually part of the definition of what they're supposed to be doing. So it's not that we don't need them, we need them to do exactly what they're meant to do, which is manage and protect us against risk. This photo is from one of our actions. I think this was in October because we're not wearing coats. And we had a good sized group come out and launch the public campaign against Liberty Mutual. We have a 6-foot mime in the middle there, that woman who's dressed as the Statue of Liberty, who was really fantastic, and lots of other Lady Liberties. And at that point, we had released a scorecard. There was a report that came out that scored 30 global insurers on climate change. And at that point, Liberty Mutual was dead last. They had no policies. And we've been doing more and more actions in front of the company. In December, there was a op-ed by Bill McKibben in the Boston Globe calling out Liberty Mutual and their part in the climate crisis. And 6 hours later, Liberty Mutual announced they had a new sustainability CEO and that they had a coal policy, which leaves a lot to be desired. It doesn't rule out insuring new coal plants. And as you guys know, there's a lot of new coal plants being proposed globally. It also doesn't say anything about tar sands. So, you know, that's what we're pushing for them to take the lead on.
So then what does the policy do?
It restricts insurance for companies that have more than 25% of their revenue from coal. And so that in itself is a loophole because a lot of mining companies are involved in mining different materials, and often it doesn't make up more than 25%. There's something called the Global Coal Exit List, and you can find a lot of companies on there that have, you know, less than 25% of their activity from coal. So it is a broad stroke, and there's a lot of coal sneaking through right now. Great.
So if you put all these finance targets together, you come up with Stop the Money Pipeline, which is a national campaign targeting mainly BlackRock, Chase, and Liberty Mutual, but the entire finance industry is fair game, including pension funds and how those monies get channeled into fossil fuels. So Stop the Money Pipeline is associated with Bill McKibben and Jane Fonda and some other big people, but it's also a lot of youth. It's all kinds of organizations. It's led by 350.org, and it's coming to Boston. So that's one of the things we wanted to talk to you about. April 23rd is what it's really gearing up to right now. That's the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. It's an entire week of actions, especially 3 days of youth climate strikes. And one of them is devoted to finance targets. So April 23rd, we're going to be taking action in Boston involving Liberty Mutual, BlackRock, Chase, and we're starting to plan that now, and we would love to have help with figuring out what we want to do, how we want to do it, and having Sierra Club show up big time for that. So Kathy.
So like Debbie said, This is really focusing on April 23rd. Of course, there's a lot that's planned that's in the works right now for Finance Day on April 23rd. In fact, we'll just kind of skim the top right now. And like Debbie said, we do want to get into the discussion time and get a little bit more into detail. The momentum, of course, is going to continue after April 23rd, going back to one of the principles that Mary mentioned, the sustained pressure. The momentum will continue into the shareholder season and on into the future until we win. So I'm going to outline some actions that are in various stages of planning right now. And as I kind of go quickly through these next few slides, I'm going to invite you to consider ways in which we can engage Sierra Club Massachusetts members and how these ideas, these actions can connect with the work that the Energy Committee is already doing. So at the end, as we have our discussion and brainstorming time, jot your ideas down and let's come back to those. So Boston, of course, is a financial hub, and the corporations we're targeting have major presences here. So we have actions planned already at Chase Bank and Liberty Mutual. 350 and Insure Our Future are taking the leads on those actions. You'll see a few additional details on the handout that went around. And as we get additional details, additional sites and varied actions, there's going to be information and publicity on how Sierra Club members can be involved. April 23rd is the day of action, so be sure and mark your calendars for that. We're going to have actions throughout downtown and beyond. BlackRock, Chase, and Liberty Mutual are definite sites. Others will be added. The plan is to make it possible for anyone who wants to participate in any one of those sites or in multiple sites during the day, to hear from a variety of speakers and to march with a mighty voice. Again, we've got details in process and those will be widely publicized. Spring shareholder season comes up next. It spans the months of April and May. Actions for individuals and groups will be focused on supporting some of the key shareholder resolutions that have already been proposed or will be, digging into the related regulations and policies. So this is an opportunity to use all of the skills that we have at calling, at social media, and at being there. And the opportunities continue. Use your connection, use your role as a shareholder, and be aware of how your funds are invested. There are some sites listed that can help you evaluate where your funds are invested and consider if they're doing what you want them to do and supporting what you want them to support. So, to summarize, what's coming up? Opportunities to show up, to call, to be involved. And as we continue to do all of those things, we will continue to influence what gets financed.
That's what we wanted to share with you, and we welcome your questions, advice, observations.
So this is Deb. I just want to jump in here. I've been listening. Thank you guys so much for this awesome work. And I just wanted to give a little bit of context about, because Sierra Club has, different, there's a national organization, chapters, campaigns. And so the way that BlackRock's Big Problem and financial advocacy has been fitting into the Sierra Club organization has been that it's been a national program that Ben Cushing, who Mary and Kathy both mentioned, he sits in Washington, D.C., and he basically directs the financial advocacy for the national organization. And what he does is he helps support chapters with, communications and strategy to help us join in with the BlackRock's Big Problem and Stop the Money Pipeline and these other financial advocacy campaigns. So I just kind of wanted to give you that background. And then the second piece that's going on at Sierra Club National is actually the foundation. Sierra Club Foundation, the board has a lot of shareholder advocacy as part of their discussions and work as well. And I think that I know for sure that like Lauren Blackford, who's actually the president of the Sierra Club board, not the Sierra Club Foundation board, and Gail Greenwald, both of them have participated in these, showing up to shareholder meetings and bringing in proxy people to do the vote, to basically vote the will of the people in front of, to disrupt these meetings that are going forward that usually don't include impacted people in the voting process. So I just kind of wanted to give a background that's what's been going on, and what Kathy Zeke is doing here is she's offering to help lead this work for our chapter, which I'm eternally grateful for, because it's really exciting work, and I'm just really grateful that she stepped up to do this for us.
Yes, thank you, Kathy.
Yay, Kathy! Woo!
I had a question as this was going through. So for all the three different, like, petals of the stool, are any of them, the asset managers, insurers, financiers, also doing any investment in renewables yet? Is it much smaller percentages? Is it nothing at all?
Tiny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I don't know for the insurance industry. I mean, I think that they're one of the largest investors in fossil fuels, and that's just what we've been focusing on.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Michelle. I don't know like the percentages, like, Mary probably knows better than the rest of us here. But, when I was in the wind business, certainly all of these banks were very involved, and they still are, in putting up wind farms around the country. So, wind farms are probably the most bankable investment you can do right now. So there's a reason why the banks are there. It's more bankable than a fracking operation.
So one question I have is, at least in real estate and other assets, there's the notion of reinsurance. So insurance companies themselves get insurance, and their reinsurance is sort of the last payer, if you will. Is there any amount of reinsurance going on with respect to fossil fuels investments of any, or insurance? Not really investments.
I think that all aspects of the insurance market are implicated in it, and there's a number of different companies too within Liberty Mutual that are considered member holding companies. So you may think that you have insurance with Liberty Mutual, but it may be with a secondary underwriter. Yeah.
And then the other sort of question that comes to my mind is, there has to be a financial analysis and rationale for them investing and continuing to invest in fossil fuel companies. They must think that there's moolah to be made by making those investments, as opposed to some other kinds of investments, right? So to what extent, maybe this is sort of a question to national, but to what extent are we able to demonstrate or prove or produce models that indicate that that's, no longer valid thinking, that these companies are in fact doomed to fail on their own, and you don't want to be on the ship when it goes down, kind of rationale for getting out of them, as opposed to a pure climate change reason for getting out of those investments. Has that general topic come up in any way?
Yeah.
What?
So as part of the ecosystem that's working on these financial levers, we have folks that are called IEFA, which is the Institute for Energy and Economics Financial Analysis.
Good for you.
And and so they are amazing. Actually, one of their key folks testified, Randy organized panels and testimonies for the
local option.
Yeah, the local option that came out of committee recently. And so one of those fellows is, his name's Tom Sanzillo, and he's the former New York City comptroller. So there's some great analyses that gets to that. But herein lies the conflict of interest in the asset manager space in the industry, where they, let's say, Duke. They're big investors in the utilities. They own a slew of utility companies, but they have other business with them. So they might do their 401k platform. They might provide them outsourced chief investment officer services. So they have other fee businesses with these companies. So they stay invested and kind of vote for business as usual because of their other relationships. And like Senator Warren has wanted to have more regulation, even our House Financial Services Committee today wants to have more regulation, more scrutiny about this, but there hasn't been that kind of movement yet. So
Yeah.
does that
That helps,
make
yeah,
sense?
no,
Tim?
that definitely
If I
helps.
can add to that.
Oh, please do.
So on the fourth leg of the four-legged stool is the institutional investors, which includes university endowments, and I think that there's a really good example in why universities are dragging their feet on this exact question, because there is an overlap in relationships. And I was at an event where President Bacow at Harvard was asking, how could we do this to our donors? You know, isn't there, you know, like, how can we maintain academic freedom and which seemed like a contradiction in and of itself, but they're getting funding from energy companies and they're investing in those companies, and so they don't want to jeopardize their donors. And so that's another tricky reason why they don't walk away. But there's a lot of relationships. I think that there's also just a general lethargy in change. And, you know, it really is a moment like when Larry blinked, you know, that is an acknowledgement that there's a shift in the financial landscape and that needs to be recognized. Climate is a material risk to business. And businesses that are not recognizing that are behind the ball. Businesses that are ahead of the curve. And so I think that it's a matter of leaders and laggards right now. And we're excited to see more leadership, but it's not at the place where it needs to be.
Well,
Yeah. But
So
we're in this turning the ship.
I have one more question for you, and then I'll let others.
And then I'm gonna see if people
Speak
on the phone want to.
Yeah, we should do that. So there seems to be a bit of a tension
I got
between
one
whether you
online,
should
too.
divest or whether you should stay invested and advocate as a shareholder, right? Now, my own personal view on this is that as an individual, you should divest because you have no influence really as a shareholder. But the question to a large institutional organization would be, do you think it would be a valid response by Larry Fink or anybody else to say, I'm staying invested so that I can change my holding company's behavior or not? Is there any?
There's a really good example of that.
Yeah.
So a big institutional investor, asset manager, Legal & Guardian, which is based in the UK, was invested in Exxon and stayed invested in Exxon and tried to change that company through its shareholder advocacy and
Year after year after year.
yes, and yanked everything out except a little bit, when that little bit was 300 million, which sounds like a lot to me, but it was a little bit. But they left some of their, they left some investments in Exxon so they could have a voice. And so, how do we get into insurance company annual general meetings where Sierra Club folks have been really instrumental in getting into those meetings because we own some shares. So, yeah, well, a couple more, but, it depends how much they cost. But like when I went down to Dominion to their annual shareholder meeting, we had a lot of Sierra Club folks that were very, they don't like Dominion. So they came out and we were able to get into those meetings. So, yeah, so it's good to stay invested. A little bit, ethical investors are invested in these companies too, because they, like if you divest, you don't have a voice.
That's right.
Right, so.
If I can add,
Good.
personally, I'm in favor of engaging with insurance and engaging with utilities, for example, and staying invested and having a seat at the table, because I think those industries have a role to play and need to be part of the transition. I think that oil majors, for example, or coal companies are digging in their heels, and they are not remaking themselves in a big way. If a Shell invests in wind, it's a fraction of their overall business.
And they spend more money marketing their investment in wind or advertising it than they do actually investing.
Yeah.
Did you
So
see
I
the
think
headline today that BP is now committed to being carbon offset neutral by 2050?
Yeah.
But when they rebranded as Beyond Petroleum, they also ended up selling off their solar. So, you know, they have to show that they're fully committed. They have to remake their companies to convince people like me that, you know, we should have, you know, remain invested in these that are wholly focused on fossil fuels.
I'm
One
going to be
question.
quiet now. Actually, David,
Yeah,
you and I
one-
have spoken up. Why don't we give people on the
Well,
phone a
I
chance?
don't think I asked a question
Oh, okay.
during the answer, but this is like a Q&A. How do you make it, or is it easy to find out, let's say I have a lot in Fidelity low price stock, so it's a mutual fund, or it could have an ETF.
Hi guys, it's Sue Butler. I'm back.
Okay.
You put me on permanent mute. I couldn't get you to unmute me.
I'm so sorry, Sue. I was trying to unmute you. But I'm glad that
Well, I'm back.
I should call back in. Hold, David's asking a question, then we're gonna go to you.
Okay, so first of all, it's straightforward, like for me, I think it's straightforward for me to find out how much does Fidelity Low Price Stock Mutual Fund have in these people, and then I can respond to that. And I guess the second is, if it's straightforward, are you getting the word out to individuals and companies? It's easy to find out whether these how you are indirectly invested in these. Here's how you do it, and have a campaign that says, check your mutual funds and ETFs, so that people do that and don't just say, oh, I'm not invested, and they don't realize they are. So how easy do you make it? And I presume what I said is a routine way to find out.
You know, I can say that there's, so part of Stop the Money Pipeline has a Move Your Money focus, and that's going to be rolling out online soon. So that would include tips for individuals. But I often go to fossilfreefunds.org, and you can put in any mutual fund, and it will give you a profile of what's included.
Oh, okay.
So that's there. And actually, Fidelity is doing a little bit better with their filters, and I think that they may have some features on their website internally where you can compare the environmental score.
They are terrible at voting. They vote for business as usual, and I can send you the report if you like.
Okay.
I mean,
I'll-
just resources for investors on their site.
All right.
I'll comment on the,
Hi, Pete.
hi. I have been using this fossilfreefunds.org, working my way through divestment of my portfolio. It's actually very useful, easy to use, and you can put on filters and basically find A-rated funds that are fossil-free. Very, very highly recommend it. I had one other question. In the slides, there was something about a pension investment fund and a legislation related to that. I'd like a little more detail on what's going on in that area and how we might advocate within a municipal government to make that change.
Great question. This legislative session, there were two bills that Sierra Club endorsed that Mass Divest Coalition got introduced, H 3662 and S 636. they're the local option fossil fuel divestment bill, and they would authorize local retirement systems to divest from fossil fuels if they choose. It doesn't require any action, and it's really only for retirement boards that control some or all of their assets. So a lot of funds, and I don't know where you're calling from, like, what area are you from?
From Westboro.
From Westboro? There, you know, so these funds are both at the city level and at the county level. And so I don't have my cheat sheet on that with me, but I can follow up separately. But there are, so that bill was reported favorably out of the Public Service Committee. Right now, it's sitting with the House Clerk, and we're trying to figure out which committee we're with next. It may be Ways and Means, it may not be, because it doesn't require any spending by the legislature. So, but we would love to continue the partnership with Mass Sierra Club to just drive calls to reps and senators to make clear that there's support for this bill. There's over 80 co-sponsors right now, and at least in the Public Service Committee, I know we had 13 favorable votes and 4 abstentions. I'm trying to figure out who those are. But there's a general awareness in the building now that, you know, especially with the briefing that we had and with the testimony that we had at our hearings, that this is in line with fiduciary duty. And by not acting, and this is the case we're making, they're actually abdicating fiduciary duty. So we need to realign things. And there's a lot of opportunity in the rest of the session to continue to support that bill. And that's kind of part 1 of a 3-part campaign for mass divest. You know, part 1 is get the authorization. Part 2 is get the retirement boards to commit. You know, all of this came out of Somerville Retirement Board divesting in 2017. The state regulatory agency made them move the money back. They made them reverse their divestment. And Denise Provo, the rep for Somerville, introduced a home rule petition, and they didn't want one town getting authorization because there's 104 retirement systems. So they said, come back with something that's for everybody. And we were like, okay, great. You know, so now we have this local option for the state. But in those 2 years, in the last 2 years since Somerville was forced to reinvest $9.5 million in fossil fuel funds, they lost out on 5% higher returns. Like you know, so it's a very real issue. You know, we were talking with, you know, pensions and retirement boards are looking at pension liabilities, and when, you know, this was the equivalent of about $500 million in 2 years, which actually exceeds their pension liability. So it's a real solution to some other problems. Sue, you're up.
Oh, okay. First of all, this is really a superb presentation. Thank you very, very much. My question is, given that many branches of government are really failing and abdicating their responsibility to regulate, the conflicts of interest that you talk about and fiduciary responsibilities have a white-collar crime side to what's actually happening. And can we facilitate any criminal prosecution for these white-collar crimes?
We're bringing you to Washington, D.C., Sue.
I'll be glad to go. I'll show up. Just tell me when and where.
Like facial fiduciary duty.
Well, you know, Tom Sanzillo, who we've mentioned a couple
And
times.
conflict of interest. Yeah.
Well, Tom Sanzillo is itching to assist anyone who wants to sue their retirement system, especially young retirees who are not being, you know, cared for in the current management. You know, like I'm a member of the Cambridge retirement system for 14 years of service as the recycling director, and I'm eligible for my benefits in 15 years, and I'm a little worried. I mean, you know, I would say that these portfolios
Right.
at this point don't have more than 4% in fossil fuels, and like 300 million sounds small. I mean, 4% sounds small, but it still is many, many retirees' benefits when you look at.
And it's going to compound over the years.
Yes.
So it's going to cost you in terms of your performance of the fund, but also if you monetize the climate costs, which a number of insurance places are, that should also be part of the calculation,
Mm-hmm.
right? That neglect is a failure.
You know, the other thing I would say in terms of lawsuits.
I just want to make sure we don't run out of time before Kathy has the chance.
Wait. No, let me just clarify what I'm saying, because it's not a lawsuit. A criminal procedure does not come from a private suit, and I'm saying this is criminal behavior.
You have a Liberty Beauty.
Okay, so
Yeah, so,
I'm gonna take it. Thank you. I think Kathy Zeke has been waiting to say something. Kathy, do you want to unmute yourself?
I haven't been waiting to say something other than to just listen to the conversation. I am also sensitive to the fact that there are additional items on the committee's agenda.
Right.
So, Paul,
this
please
is
guide
an
us
important
there.
conversation, so I do want to let it have its time. However, I might try to suggest that any further conversation we have be more directly around what, as a committee or as a chapter, can we do or should we be doing or could we consider doing? And I'll use my favorite word that I use all the time. People on the committee are familiar with it. Where is the leverage? What kind of actions actually, for the time invested, yield the greatest sort of reward, if you will?
And we would love that
Just
input.
showing up as a green Statue of Liberty, that it?
It's fun.
It's fun.
Very
I'm
eye-catching.
a humorless guy, so I'm not interested in fun. I'm interested.
Oh, come on. Come on.
Well, you know,
But you understand the gist of what I'm asking. Kathy might be one of the best to comment on
We
that.
can think about that. And
Um,
I think Kathy had some things about outreach to Sierra Club members, getting people involved. We want people to know about this so that when there's an opportunity to call Michelle Edkins about that climate denier again, that people know enough to take action. So I didn't know, Kathy, if you wanted advice or ideas about the outreach that you've been thinking you would do, or?
I would love advice, ideas, brainstorming, and the kinds of things that we've mentioned. Paul, you mentioned the types of actions. Debbie, you mentioned the types of communication. Are there particular types of combinations there, particular things that that would really be productive with the Sierra Club Mass membership in terms of engaging with the work that's coming up?
You want me to take that?
Sure.
So I think, you know, I've had a few conversations with different members of the presenters tonight at different times about this. I think that, you know, part of what, you know, what we need to do is build a team of people who care about this and are invested in this. And this is one of the ways where Ben Cushing can help us out with that, because he's already communicating with action takers who care about financial advocacy. Because, you know, he'll send an action alert that says, hey, BlackRock's big problem is happening this week. You know, send Larry Fink a message, and the people from Massachusetts who send the message, he can give us their names and we can communicate to them to say, hey, this is going on. So that's like one way that we can kind of start working already with people who care. And then I think the second piece is to, and I think I've talked to Debbie and Mary about this, is to write, you know, like a blog post about what we're doing. What are the 3 or 4 legs of the stool, depending on how many we're presenting, you know.
The design keeps evolving.
Yeah, and just about, you know, and put that in our e-newsletter, and then we can of course also include an article about it in the end of the year communication that we send out this year. And so I think, you know, there's like, that's kind of just how to directly communicate with our membership. And, I think that we need to have clear, actionable items that as we bring people in, and also, create a bit of community, when the same people are showing up for things. So I think that that's like kind of a broad overview of, the way that we kind of build this for the chapter. But I think that, Kathy and the people who, the kind of the coalition, the Stop the Money Pipeline coalition that's being built, you guys need to sit down, and I can join as well, and just kind of develop like what the campaign is, what's the next 6 months, what's the next year, what's the next 2 years. And then we can kind of build like how we do an arc of communication, building our capacity with the chapter.
There's a lot to think about here. I mean, just my view is this is an extremely important thing to be doing.
I agree.
My favorite word again. I think this whole campaign has leverage.
Yes.
I have a response to this, Paul, which is that in the last few minutes, we've heard a number of websites where you can review the functioning of your portfolio.
Mhm.
And if we could publish that or have it be listed as information on our website, I think that would certainly be useful to me and probably other people too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Sue, and on the blog post too.
Yes.
Nice. Yeah, exactly. Just someplace where it's there for reference and you can point people to it.
Mm-hmm.
And as you might know, or whoever actually looks at our website on this call, we have like a list of all the different areas that we work on. And of course, this isn't up there yet because we're just starting this as a chapter. But I agree, Sue. We should make a page about this that explains what it is and also gives people resources to get involved.
Absolutely.
Thanks. We can make sure that Kathy has all those resources from Stop the Money Pipeline and everything. We can put it together for Sierra Club, and that would be great for other organizations too.
Thank you.
One upcoming opportunity for Sierra Club people beyond this committee to find out about this is a webinar we're planning for February 25th, and that's listed on the document that I shared with Paul to send out to everyone who's here tonight. So we're going to be sharing more information about that, but if we could get a lot of Sierra Club people on that call, they would hear
an overview.
They'd hear basically what you heard tonight, maybe more equally distributed between banks, between all four of the pillars of the finance industry, and then talking about what we're going to do on April 23rd. So that would be a real great on-ramp for a lot of Sierra Club people.
What time is that webinar?
8 p.m.
On February 25th.
Yeah.
And we know April 8th, we're going to be outside of Liberty Mutual.
Yeah, and that's
April 8th.
And actually, I sent Deb a little information about this, but we are looking to identify policyholders, Liberty Mutual policyholders. So if any of you have Liberty Mutual insurance or know somebody, we'd like to invite you to come to the meeting with us, like go inside or assign someone to be your proxy. But our goal is to get 5 to 10 people that are policyholders or proxies to go into the meeting. We haven't figured out exactly what we're doing, whether we're speaking by invite or not by invite. But simultaneously, we're going to have a big rally outside of the headquarters. That's April 8th.
Is something happening inside Liberty Mutual?
So that's their annual members meeting.
Oh, it is? Oh, okay.
And so if you have Liberty Mutual insurance, you should have received an invitation that talks about April 8th, 10 a.m., Berkeley Street.
It's not a stockholders meeting, it's a policy.
So the mutual part is, kind of lost on a lot of us, but it's like a co-op of sorts where you, as a policy owner, are a mutual member of the company, even though they don't treat you like that. So this is, they don't usually have anybody attending that's not a corporate executive, but David Long, the CEO, will be there, and others on their team.
I want to go in so badly.
Yeah.
Randy, can you
Quick, buy an insurance policy.
Can you say how long this meeting lasts?
What I've been told is that it's a 10-minute affair.
10 minutes?
Yeah.
So the idea is to go inside and make it a little bit longer with a few people?
We have,
putting some pressure on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working with folks within Rainforest Action Network and Ensure Our Future Coalition, and so we're figuring out what we're gonna do inside. We're also in the process of connecting with policyholders, getting them to ask to speak, and seeing what corporate's response is to that request. So we're filtering in to the company right now. So if you have Liberty Mutual, feel free to go to tinyurl.com/Liberty Mutual member or email me.
Well, it's actually in the
That's also on
document.
that handout, right, Debbie?
Oh, yes, it's on the handout. And
Yeah.
there's a list of the companies that you need to check your policy for.
Yes,
So there's information there for you.
yeah.
So we have some great information and some great activities and opportunities coming up. And the opportunities for the Sierra Club membership, then we want to be sure and get that information out in several different formats. So several of them have come up already on the website, and then word of mouth certainly is going to be important. Each of the folks here passing it on to other people, and what other means would you all suggest? Other creative and wonderful things.
On social media, Unfriend Fossil Fuels is where we do a lot of posting.
Oh, that's a page.
That's a page, Unfriend Fossil Fuels.
Yeah, we have social media avenues we can post it to as well. Working with Ben Cushing is probably the best situation because he has a digital team that will have a lot more capacity than chapter
Sure.
staff, I think. So I'm glad you all are connected with him. And then one other question that I had, oh no, now it's slipping.
So is Ben Cushing coordinating all the local chapters on this nationally, or?
At National.
There's a steering committee. There's
Okay.
a national steering committee for Stop the Money Pipeline that has 4 working groups. There's Digi and Comms, there's policy, partnerships, and mobilization, I believe.
And AGM.
There's also,
AGMs
one is
and
coordinating general meetings, AGMs.
Yeah, the AGMs, and then there's a new pensions working group. So those groups are meeting pretty regularly. Most are meeting weekly. The overall coalition has update calls every week, and the steering committee is meeting regularly too. So there's this whole infrastructure that's created, and it's pulling from Sierra Club, 350, Amazon Watch, Rainforest Action Network.
Union of Concerned Scientists,
Yeah,
CIEL.
Oil Change International. There's like major groups, you know, and the Stop the Money Pipeline, you know, we mentioned at the beginning, is getting a lot of attraction by celebrities endorsing this too. So the Bill McKibbins and the Jane Fondas and the Naomi Kleins and the Martin Sheen. Others that got arrested as part of the Fire Drill Fridays, you know, and the Years Project is really engaged in doing video content.
And it's already been tagged by conservatives as this extremist group targeting all the big corporations. It was like, wow.
We're on the map. We're on the conservative.
That was
I
really
have
fun.
a theory
Great.
that I have a theory that most of them don't actually deny climate change. They know it's happening. They just refuse to admit it. A couple of things.
Big deal, or, you know, we're getting there, or
Yeah.
Do we
we're
have
taking steps.
designated contact point in the chapter to hear all of these things as they come up over the weeks?
Kathy.
There she is. Kathy, we're talking about you.
Yes.
Okay. Good to know. So
Yeah.
if something pops up, we'll find out.
Yeah, you know, just to clarify, Ben Cushing's role is to help, you know, do communication internally with Sierra Club because, you know, chapters, like we're not funded to do this work. So, you know, he can help us with doing our communications and our strategies and stuff like that. Like, it, you know, so that's kind of the role that, you know, he's playing outside of like the big, you know, there's a big coalition steering committee, but then Ben is working in Sierra Club to help chapters, you know, be aligned with the larger coalition and be supported in the work.
Yes, and definitely, he's an important point of contact. Michelle with social media, there are a number of places that are already set up. And as you're thinking, if you come up with any other kind of under the radar ideas, creative ideas that have worked for various committees or individuals in the past to get the word out, to get people engaged, please send them my way. I can put my email in the chat. And I would be just so interested in the kinds of things that folks have found to be successful that are not the obvious ones.
Yeah. You know, we also created a Google Calendar that's shared among these organizations so that you can find actions listed for these targets. And 350 is going to be populating that with Chase targets and Liberty Mutual and BlackRock and State Street and pension campaigns. So
I've just got a question for you, Randy. Are you also like hooked in with CLU's advocacy campaign with Fidelity?
We haven't heard back from Community Labor United about wanting to work together on their public good campaign. So we are open to it. And we're building something that could benefit what they're doing, and we'd love to have them join us as well, but nothing's happened.
we know about their Fidelity campaign and the public good.
Yeah, and for people on the call who don't know, Community Labor United is an organization locally associated with the Green Justice Coalition, and their Fidelity campaign is targeting Fidelity's sort of pass-through donor-advised fund money to anti-everything groups, anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ, anti-abortion, all sorts of hate groups, white supremacist groups, receive money through the Fidelity channel.
As charitable, tax-deductible contributions.
Yep.
Oh, that's
So
terrible.
that's a campaign that we would love to work with. We're just not quite there yet. I think they have their hands full.
My other question, which I just remembered, was, have you guys been thinking about an inside-outside strategy with this campaign? Like, I have a friend who works at Liberty Mutual, who's the chair of the sustainability committee in the town that I grew up, and he's involved with a group of people who work at Liberty Mutual that they're like a sustainability team. And he told me about when they passed the coal policy, and I said to him that, you know, there's more to do, and he totally gets it. So, and I feel like other people probably know people who work for some of these corporations, not at like high levels of management, but still that have the ability to organize people who work in the company.
That's hugely important for all these campaigns, is that when there's employee, you know, or the employees just say, wait a second, there could be a better way to do business. That is really powerful, and you've seen that. You know, you've seen that with a lot of the tech firms. Their employees have kind of banded together and have done some small things and some have done some, you know, pretty aggressive things. So employee engagement is important. BlackRock's Big Problem has a video and a separate website where employees can, you know, have some privacy in terms of getting to see what BlackRock is doing. And Randy's working on employee engagement. We all kind of could work on employee engagement. It's we're testing messaging through LinkedIn on BlackRock's Big Problem. So yeah, that would be. Did you write that down?
Yeah, no, I will follow up with you. But yeah, I mean, like Mary is saying, employee engagement is a core part of the strategy, and we have a spreadsheet of people that we've been talking with privately to get a sense of what's going on the inside, and to be able to assist and support, and also hear more to understand, you know, how this is infiltrating the company. So yes, if people know Liberty Mutual employees, I have like a little paragraph to send to them to say, would you talk to my friend who's working on this campaign? Private, confidential. And then, you know, here in the room, we've got this little Valentine's Day card that we we're giving out to prospective employees at Liberty Mutual's presence at the Bentley Career Fair yesterday. They draw widely on Bentley and Simmons College. We're going to have a presence at Simmons College Career Fair on March 27th, and it's a real leverage point for the insurance industry, because they're looking at a major talent shortage because a lot of their staff are retiring, and insurance is not like on the top of a lot of people's list of like, I want to go work in the insurance industry. And so it's a real weak point for them. And you know, when you talk to students, everyone cares about climate change, and they want to work for a company that is part of the solution. So both internally and prospective employees is part of the strategy.
When you mentioned LinkedIn, it just struck me that's LinkedIn is a standard technique one uses in searching for a job, where you say, I'd like to know people who work at LinkedIn at Liberty Mutual. Someone could do that. You know, not just that you're lucky enough to have a friend where you know somebody, but you can go on LinkedIn, and if you have a connection on LinkedIn, you can start approaching and things like that. So, hey, it's standard to network for a job. Why not use it to network for a connection?
Our campaign has done targeting advertisements on LinkedIn to try to identify employees. In the fall, we had this climate survey. I was giving out donuts in front of the building, just saying, we're doing an employee survey today, and getting people to answer a few questions as to how well do you think Liberty is doing on climate, and would you want to talk to us more about it? And so that there's an online version of that survey, and that's one of the ways that we've identified people internally to talk with. We did have a meeting with the sustainability CEO a couple weeks ago, and that dialogue has opened. After, you know, I think 18 letters, they've responded directly to us. Because the campaign is really about directly dialoguing to get them to adopt a policy that we've already drafted. You know, we want to be partners and help them lead and not fall behind.
Well, listen, we're past our time. I certainly appreciate our speakers spending as long as they have with us. We are not the top CEOs or financial managers of anything, as far as I know. So your time, that's very much appreciated. We have a lot of things to talk about, I think, afterwards.
Thank you so much.
As far as the rest of the Energy Committee meeting agenda, I'm going to jettison it. We will schedule another meeting fairly soon, and I'll do a doodle poll on that for everybody, and we will not commit you to a late night here in Boston or wherever you are. So with that, I think I am going to actually adjourn us, and once again thank all our guests here. So
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.